Welcome to the West Wing Week, your guide to everything that's happening at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. This week, President Obama focused on the situation in Libya, receiving secure communications from his national security team, while the first family visited Latin America, our neighbors bound to us by shared history, values, and interests. They made stops in Brazil, Chile, and El Salvador. That's March 18th to the 24th, or OCONUS 2, Mamalluca. On Friday night, March 18th, the first family departed Andrews Air Force Base for the President's swing through Latin America to strengthen our relationship with our neighbors who are playing a growing role in our economic future and to renew our ties to longtime allies. On Saturday, March 19th, President Obama arrived in Brasilia, that nation's capital and a stunning example of modern architecture. His first stop was to the Palácio do Planalto, where he was welcomed by Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff with an official arrival ceremony.
How are you? Fine. Very nice.
President Rousseff then showed the President and First Lady a special exhibit featuring the work of women Brazilian artists.
Yeah, these are beautiful. So these are all women artists?
Yes.
The two leaders then sat down to discuss a host of regional and global issues, including security, energy, and the indispensable partnership between the two largest economies and the two largest democracies in the Western Hemisphere.
And Brazil is my first stop. This is no coincidence. The friendship between the people of the United States and Brazil spans nearly 2 centuries.
Presidents Obama and Rousseff then met with a group of Brazilian and American CEOs to discuss the important trade and economic relationship between our nations. Two-way trade between the U.S. and Brazil has doubled in the past decade to more than $80 billion in 2010. It was a theme the President built on later at a business summit held downtown.
And for us, this is a job strategy. When our businesses send more products overseas, it supports the workers who make and sell those products. Now, I think most American businessmen who are here understand this. For every $1 billion in U.S. exports, we see 5,000 U.S. jobs.
President Obama was also closely monitoring the situation in Libya, where Colonel Gaddafi continued his attacks on his own people. The President made a statement to inform the American public of our commitment to action alongside a broad coalition to enforce United Nations Security Council Resolution 1973.
Today, I authorize the Armed Forces of the United States to begin a limited military action in Libya in support of an international effort to protect Libyan civilians. That action has now begun.
Before leaving Brasilia, the President and First Family joined President Rousseff at her house, bidding her farewell and taking time to meet her family before heading to Rio de Janeiro. He also got a chance to talk shop on Race at the Top.
The state says, here's our plan to improve teachers, to lift up the worst schools. Here's our plan to show progress. And so what happens is those plans are evaluated and we say, you know what, these 3 states, they have the best plan.
On Sunday, March 20th, the First Family was in Rio de Janeiro, the second largest and most iconic city in Brazil. They made their first stop at the City of God favela, a well-known impoverished community in Rio. The First Family got a chance to see some cultural performances, including capoeira, a traditional Brazilian martial art. The President and Malia also kicked a soccer ball around with some local kids. President Obama then went to the Municipal Theater in Finlandia Square to deliver a speech to the Brazilian people, touching on the culture of diversity and tolerance that defines both our nations. But first, he boned up on his Portuguese.
Alô, cidade maravilhosa.
Perfect.
We also believe that in nations as big and diverse as ours, shaped by generations of immigrants from every race and faith and background, democracy offers the best hope that every citizen is treated with dignity and respect, and that we can resolve our differences peacefully, that we find strength in our diversity.
Later that night, the First Family made their final stop in Brazil, seeing the famous statue Christ the Redeemer that overlooks the city from the top of Corcovado Mountain.
Okay, where are we?
We're over there. That's where we are.
On Monday, March 21st, President Obama arrived in Santiago, the capital of Chile, where he was greeted at an official arrival ceremony at La Moneda Palace.
Welcome. Very welcome.
Perfect weather.
Perfect weather for you. Hello, Michelle.
My friend, how are you?
Fine, I'm sorry.
Mr. President,
Nice to meet you.
This is our expert on Latin America.
Are you
Yeah, absolutely. He knows everything.
so young?
Yeah, but he's very good.
While the media waited for a joint press conference, President Obama and President Piñera discussed the deep economic ties between our two countries. In fact, since the Chilean Free Trade Agreement was ratified in 2004, trade to Chile has increased 300%, which supports an estimated 70,000 good-paying American jobs.
Today, we've proven again that when the United States and Chile work together in a spirit of mutual interest and mutual respect, it's not only good for the peoples of our nations, I believe it's good for the region, and it's good for the world.
The president then went to the Centro Cultural Palacio to deliver a speech directly to the people of Chile. But first, he stopped to meet some of the former presidents of Chile, along with their spouses.
At a time when people around the world are reaching for their freedoms, Chile shows that, yes, it is possible to transition from dictatorship to democracy and to do so peacefully. Indeed, our marvelous surroundings today, just steps from where Chile lost its democracy decades ago, is a testament to Chile's progress and its undying democratic spirit.
Later that night, the Chilean president hosted a state dinner, complete with a performance by a popular Chilean rock group, Los Jaivas, performing their signature classic, Mamalluca. On Tuesday, March 22nd, the first family arrived in San Salvador, El Salvador, where they were again honored with an official reception by President Funes and the First Lady of El Salvador.
This is the Secretary of Labor.
La secretaria de
My Chief of Staff, Bill Davis.
El Salvador and the U.S. share many relationships, not just in economic and trade terms, but because Salvadorans are one of the United States' largest Hispanic populations.
I think the partnership that we're forging together are exactly what's needed in the Americas today. Neighbors joining with neighbors to realize progress that none of us can achieve alone. Every nation, I believe, no matter how large or how small, can contribute to that progress.
Later that afternoon, the president visited the National Cathedral and the tomb of Oscar Romero.
So for us to be able to come here and say a prayer, remember not only the history of this country, but also the hope that sprang from it.
Archbishop Romero, the unofficial patron saint of the Americas and a champion for democracy, was killed in 1980. That night, at an official state dinner hosted by El Salvador, the president renewed the ties between our two nations with a toast.
El Salvador is one of those places where the bonds between the United States and Latin America are strongest. Just about every Salvadorian has a loved one or a friend in the United States.
On Wednesday, March 23rd, after convening a meeting of his national security team, President Obama and the rest of the first family loaded Air Force One and returned to Washington, D.C. To find out more information on any of these topics or to see complete videos of these events, go to whitehouse.gov. And thanks again for checking out your West Wing Week.
Boa tarde, todo o povo brasileiro. Is that good?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not going to make a fool of myself.
No,
It'll be your fault.
I'll take that.
Okay.